doing this and how you got into it?
I actually am the third generation here. The orchard actually started in 1921. We're heading towards our 100th year. That was my great uncle started it back in 1921, and my dad took over the place back in the 1950s. In 1980, I graduated from Ohio State in horticulture and came back to the orchard then. So I've been doing it a long time. What else could I answer for you?
What's your favorite part about your job? Like, why do you love doing this?
A little bit of everything. I enjoy the variability of the job. I mean, obviously, it's not just punching in at 9 o'clock and punching out at 5 o'clock. Through the year, everything changes. Right now, we're into harvest. We'll be moving into pruning in the winter time. In the springtime, when everything starts blossoming back up, everything gets a little bit more frantic around here, and then we're back into harvest again. So it's sort of the cycle of things, I guess I like.
Any idea what that animal might be? It's actually bees. We do have a lot of honeybees out here. And usually when I talk about honeybees, I get somebody that goes, "Oh, I hate honeybees. I hate bees. I'm afraid of getting stung." Well, you know what? Bees are really important. And if I didn't have bees, I wouldn't be having apples. In fact, we probably wouldn't be talking because we probably wouldn't have any food. So bees are really, really important. As we get out in the orchard, we're going to talk a little bit more about them. But the important thing is, if you see a bee flying around, what he's looking for is a flower, because he's trying to find pollen in flowers. Well, y'all look great, but none of you look like flowers, do you? No. So guaranteed, that bee is eventually going to figure out you're not a flower, he's going to fly away. And they are picking our apples and putting them into those bushel crates so that we can come by, pick up the bushels, take them up to the front, get them cleaned up, and sell them to everybody in our farm market. Now, most of these, I think they're pretty well stripping these trees. I think they're taking most of the apples off the trees. And a lot of people think they know how to pick apples. But let me show you the best way to pick apples, okay? Let me see here. A lot of people think, oh, I want this apple right here. I got my apple, right? Not the way to pick an apple. Couple of reasons. When I yanked it, I pulled him off with my fingers, didn't I? Apples bruise really easy. When they hit the ground, they're going to have a big brown mark on them. When I pulled him off the tree with my fingers, there's probably going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 bruises on that apple where I pulled him off, okay? I don't want to yank an apple off. Another reason I don't want to do that, I pulled something else, didn't I? A whole lot of leaves, but you see that little pointy thing?
Yeah.
Can you guys see that? Can you guys see that little pointy thing?
Yeah.
Would you believe me if I told you that was an apple?
Okay.
I'm not going to lie. Believe it or not, that is an apple. This is this year's apple, and that little thing right there is next year's apple. Right now we call it an apple bud. So yeah, you aren't going to eat it. It wouldn't taste good at this point, but that is an apple bud. This one I pulled off the tree, so it's going to die, okay? But let's look here. I'll bet you I can find, yep, there's another one right there. And that one, if I leave that on the tree, it'll stay that way pretty much all winter long. And then in the springtime, when it starts to get warm out, that little bud is going to pop into a big white flower. We call those apple blossoms. And if you walk through the orchard in May, there's going to be millions of white flowers every place on all of our trees. This is why I like bees, because when that bud pops into a flower, if a bee comes along and lands on that flower, what he's trying to do, he's trying to get the pollen off of that flower. Pollen is the yellow stuff in the middle of a flower. And this sounds really weird, but bees have hairy legs. Did you know that? They do. They have real hairy legs. So what they end up doing, they land on that flower and they sort of dance on the flower like this. And they get that pollen stuck to their legs so that they can fly back to the hive. So if they do that, you know what happens to the flower?
It turns into an apple.
It grows into an apple. Very, very good. If I don't have a bee land on that flower and dance on that flower, you know what happens to the flower then?
It dies.
It does. It just dries up and it falls off the tree.
Falls off
So,
the tree.
if I don't have any bees to land on my flowers, how many apples am I going to end up with? Nothing.
Nothing.
I won't have any apples. That's why bees are so important, because if I didn't have them, I wouldn't have any apples. Now, this apple right here, last year it looked just like that. Looked just like a little bud. And a bee came along when it was a flower and pollinated it. I can prove it because look at the bottom of that apple. See what that is? That's the dried up flower petals. That's where the flower was that the bee danced on and it grew into an apple. That's how apples grow. So let's get back to picking apples. If I go up to the tree and I yank my apple off like I did, I'm probably going to bruise it, right?
Not really.
I might. I know. I might be really good and I won't bruise it. But there's a good chance I may. Another reason I don't want to do that, if I yank it off, I may pull the buds off the tree. If I pull the buds off the tree, what's going to be on the tree next year?
Nothing.
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 So I want to make sure I leave the buds on the tree too. Instead of yanking the apple off, let me see if I can get back here. Can you guys see this apple right here?
Yeah.
I'm going to use, instead of my fingers, I'm going to use the palm of my hand, right like that. When an apple gets ripe, I should show you this. The stem, this part right here, it breaks really easy when they get ripe. So all I have to do is put that apple in the palm of my hand and then lift it.
And it comes off.
It came right off.
That's pretty
Reason being, I lifted it, bent that stem until it broke, and it just fell off into my hand.
That looks
Now I
tasty.
didn't bruise that apple because I hardly even touched him with my fingers, did I?
No.
And I left the buds on the tree. I didn't look, but there are several buds back here. I left all the buds on. I picked this apple the right way.
You're not gonna leave that.
Looks mighty tasty.
After I pick my apple, what do I do with it?
Wash it.
Wash it.
Oh, very good. Usually people say eat it. You should wash it.
Wash it.
Wash it before
When you wash it,
You aren't the only things that like apples.
I do.
We already talked about deer like apples, some animals like apples. Well, a lot of bugs like apples too.
Yep.
So we do actually spray our apples a couple of times a year to make sure that we don't have bug bites on our apples. I will guarantee there isn't any spray on this apple. There has to be a certain waiting period after our last spray to guarantee when it's safe to come back in. It's called a pre-harvest interval. Anyway, on these, it's somewhere around 5 to 6 weeks is all. These haven't been sprayed for almost 14, 15 weeks. So there's no chemical on that apple, but it is dirty. If you stood out, I mean, it's been growing out here for almost a year, right?
Yep.
If you stood out in the orchard for a year, would you get dirty? I get dirty in an hour out here. So it does get dirty. Should wash it, very definitely. However, this one time, I don't have a sink out here in the orchard.
Just like spit
So
on
what
it.
I'm going to do, very good, I'm actually going to just take that dirt. I'm going to wipe the dirt on my shirt.
Yeah.
I don't think my wife will mind too much getting one shirt dirty, okay? But if I shine that apple up on my shirt, you can tell it gets nice and shiny.
Oh,
Got that dirt all off of it.
Then you can eat it.
Then I can eat it. I was waiting for you to tell me to do that. Melrose are a firm apple. That means they're going to be sort of hard to bite into.
And I think
But
they're
they are a
juicy.
real tasty apple.
are they kind of like an apple?